They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But that night, sitting at my daughter-in-law's dining table with a bowl of dog food in front of me while everyone laughed, I knew mine would be served at exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, in a boardroom on the 42nd floor. My name is Catherine Pierce, and I'm 71 years old. For the past 19 years, I've served on the board of directors at Hartwell & Associates, one of the largest marketing firms in Chicago. But that evening, as I sat there listening to champagne glasses clink and watching smug smiles spread across the faces of people I'd welcomed into my family, no one at that table knew who I really was. And I intended to keep it that way for exactly 18 more hours. Let me take you back 6 months before that dinner party, because this story doesn't start with dog food. It starts with my son, Marcus, falling in love. I raised Marcus by myself after my husband died when our boy was only 7. I worked 2 jobs, secretary by day, bookkeeper by night, putting myself through night school to finish my business degree. It took me 8 years, but I did it. By the time Marcus graduated high school, I'd clawed my way into middle management. By the time he finished college, I was director of operations. And by the time he brought Vanessa home to meet me, I was sitting on the board of the very company where she'd just been hired as a senior account executive. But I never told Marcus about the board position. You see, I'd learned early in my career that being a woman in corporate leadership meant facing a very specific kind of prejudice. People made assumptions. They treated you differently. And after years of working twice as hard to earn half the respect, I'd developed a habit of separating my professional life from my personal one. At work, I was Catherine Pierce, board director. At home, I was just mom. I kept my maiden name professionally. I never talked about board meetings at family dinners. It wasn't a secret exactly. It just never came up. When Marcus first brought Vanessa home that spring afternoon, I wanted to like her. I really did. She was beautiful, confident, well-educated. She had a great job at Hartwell. She made my son happy. What more could a mother want? But there was something in her eyes when she looked around my modest 2-bedroom apartment, a flicker of judgment that disappeared so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. "So, Mrs. Pierce," she said, settling onto my floral couch with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Marcus tells me you work in admin?" "I work at an investment firm," I replied carefully. "I've been there for 23 years. "How nice," she said. The same way you might say, "how nice" about someone's stamp collection. It must be comfortable having that kind of stability. Comfortable. Stable. She made my decades of work sound like I'd been sitting behind a desk filing papers while the real business happened around me. Marcus was oblivious, beaming at both of us like we were already best friends. And maybe I was being oversensitive. Maybe I was reading too much into one word. So I smiled and served the pot roast I'd made, and I listened to Vanessa talk about her exciting new position at Hartwell, the major clients she was going to land, the corner office she'd have within 5 years. She never once asked me about my job. They got engaged 4 months later. Marcus was over the moon, and I was happy for him. I truly was. My concerns about Vanessa seemed petty in the face of his joy. Maybe I'd misjudged her. Maybe that first impression had been colored by my own insecurities. Then the wedding planning began. "We're thinking something intimate," Marcus told me over dinner one evening. "Maybe 60 people, garden ceremony, nice but not too expensive." 2 weeks later, Vanessa had transformed it into a 200-person extravaganza with a venue that cost more than I'd spent on my first car. "We'll need help with costs," Marcus said quietly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Vanessa's parents are contributing $15,000, and we were hoping you might be able to—" "Of course," I said, even though $15,000 would drain most of my savings. "Whatever you need, because that's what mothers do. We sacrifice. We give. We want our children to be happy, even when it costs us everything." Vanessa never said thank you. She simply sent me a text with the caterer's payment information and a note that read, "Transfer by Friday, please. They won't hold the date otherwise." The wedding was beautiful. I won't take that away from her. She looked stunning in a dress that cost more than I made in 3 months. The flowers were perfect, the food was exquisite, and when Marcus looked at her during their vows, I saw real love in his eyes. I sat in the third row, not the front because Vanessa's family filled those seats, and I cried. Happy tears, I told myself. These were happy tears. But in the receiving line, when I hugged my new daughter-in-law, she whispered in my ear, I hope this wasn't too much of a financial strain. I know you're on a fixed income. I wasn't on a fixed income. I made $180,000 a year, plus board stipends. But I smiled and told her not to worry because I still believed that time would smooth out these rough edges, that once we became a real family, things would be different. I was wrong. The problems started small, missed phone calls, canceled dinners. Marcus stopped coming by my apartment on Sunday afternoons, our tradition since he was 12 years old. Vanessa's parents invited us to their country club, he'd say. Or, Vanessa planned a couple's spa day. Or, Vanessa thinks we should focus on building our own family traditions. Vanessa, Vanessa, Vanessa. I tried to be understanding. Newlyweds needed space. They needed to build their own life together. But months passed, and the distance grew. My weekly calls with Marcus became bi-weekly, then monthly. When I did see him, Vanessa was always there, steering conversations, answering questions he'd directed at me, checking her phone with barely concealed impatience. At Christmas, they went to Aspen with her family. I spent the holiday alone with leftover turkey and a Hallmark movie marathon. I'm sorry, Mom, Marcus said when he called on December 26th. Her parents booked the trip months ago. It was too late to change plans. No one had mentioned it to me months ago. No one had thought to include me in any plans at all. Valentine's Day, Easter, 4th of July, each holiday came and went without an invitation. When I asked Marcus about getting together, there was always an excuse. They were busy. They had plans. Maybe next time. Maybe next time became the refrain of our relationship. Then came my 70th birthday. I didn't expect a party. I knew they were busy with their lives, but I thought surely my son would at least take me to dinner, call me, send a card. The day came and went. No call, no card, nothing. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Sorry, Mom, crazy day, happy birthday, love you. I stared at that message for 20 minutes. Crazy day. Like my birthday was something that had slipped his mind until he was getting ready for bed. Like the woman who'd raised him alone, who'd sacrificed everything to give him a good life, wasn't worth clearing an hour in his schedule. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone and went to bed, and I cried harder than I had since the day my husband died. 3 months after my forgotten birthday, I ran into Vanessa's mother, Patricia, at the grocery store. She didn't recognize me. I was reaching for a box of cereal when I heard her voice behind me, talking to someone on her phone. Absolutely exhausting, she was saying. Vanessa's been complaining about Marcus's mother for months now. Apparently the woman is desperately poor and keeps asking them for money. Can you imagine? They just had to take her out for her birthday out of obligation, and Vanessa said the woman actually cried at the restaurant. So embarrassing. I froze, my hand still extended toward the Raisin Bran. Patricia continued, oblivious to my presence. Vanessa's trying to create distance, which I completely understand. Sometimes these older women from working-class backgrounds, they become clingy, you know? They don't understand boundaries. She moved past me, still talking, and disappeared around the corner. I stood there in the cereal aisle for a full 5 minutes, trying to process what I'd just heard. They'd taken me out for my birthday. That's what Patricia had said, but they hadn't taken me anywhere. I'd spent that day alone, remember? Unless Marcus had lied to his wife, told her they'd taken me to dinner to get her off his back. And Vanessa had lied to her mother, embellishing a story that had never happened, painting me as some pathetic, crying burden they'd had to endure out of obligation. I'd never asked them for money, not once. I'd given them $15,000 for their wedding, and I'd never expected or asked for anything in return. But according to Vanessa's mother, according to the story Vanessa was telling people, I was desperately poor, clingy, an embarrassment, a burden. Standing there in that grocery store, something inside me went cold, not angry, not hurt, just cold, clear, calculating. I'd spent months wondering what I'd done wrong, how I'd failed as a mother-in-law, why Vanessa seemed to dislike me so much. Now I understood. It wasn't about anything I'd done. It was about who she thought I was, and who she thought I was someone beneath her, someone who could be dismissed, marginalized, and lied about without consequences. After that day in the grocery store, I started paying attention, real attention. The kind of attention I'd been trained to pay in boardrooms, where what people don't say is often more important than what they do. At our quarterly board meeting in June, I noticed a familiar name on the new client roster, VH Consulting, Vanessa Henderson Consulting. She'd started her own firm, a boutique operation focusing on brand rehabilitation for mid-sized companies, and Hartwell and Associates was her first major client. I'd signed off on that contract myself, along with the other board members. It was a good proposal, smart strategy, fair pricing. I'd had no reason to oppose it, and I hadn't known the VH stood for Vanessa Henderson. But now I knew. My daughter-in-law was working for the company where I sat on the board, the company that controlled her biggest contract, her professional reputation, her entire career trajectory, and she had no idea. I started reviewing her account performance. As a board member, I had access to all vendor reports, client satisfaction metrics, and financial performance data. Vanessa's work was good, not exceptional, but competent. She met deadlines. Her clients were generally satisfied. There were no complaints, no performance issues, nothing that would justify terminating her contract. I wasn't looking for a reason to sabotage her. Despite everything, I'm not a vindictive person. I was simply doing my job, and part of my job was knowing who our contractors were and how they performed. But I filed the information away. This knowledge that I held Vanessa's professional future in my hands, and she didn't even know I existed in that world. In late August, I received a text from Marcus, the first real communication I'd had from him in weeks. "Mom, Vanessa wants to have you over for dinner next Friday. Can you make it?" Vanessa wants to have you over. Not, we want to have you over. Not, we'd love to see you. Vanessa wants. Everything in me said to decline, to make an excuse, to protect myself from whatever this was. But he was my son. And despite everything, despite the hurt and the distance and the lies, I loved him. So I said yes. The week leading up to that dinner, I had a board meeting, routine quarterly review. We discussed performance metrics, approved new contracts, addressed vendor concerns, standard procedure. Then Richard Chen, our CEO, brought up a concern. "We've had some internal complaints about VH Consulting," he said, pulling up a file on the conference room screen. "Nothing that rises to the level of termination, but some communication issues, missed meetings, failure to return calls promptly, a certain condescension in her interactions with our staff." I looked at the performance reports. They were all there. 3 separate complaints from Hartwell employees about Vanessa's attitude. One from an assistant she'd apparently snapped at. Another from a junior executive she'd talked down to in a meeting. A third from someone in accounting she'd kept waiting for 40 minutes without apology. "She's talented," Richard continued, "but talent doesn't excuse treating people poorly. If this pattern continues, we'll need to have a formal conversation with her about expectations and professional conduct." The other board members nodded and reviewed the documentation. "Let's give her one more quarter," Richard finally decided. "But I'll be monitoring this closely. VH Consulting is up for contract renewal in December. If these issues persist, we'll need to seriously consider whether this partnership is serving the company's best interests." "Agreed," I said, along with the other board members. That was Thursday. Dinner at Vanessa's was Friday. I arrived at their townhouse at 7 o'clock sharp, carrying a bottle of wine and a homemade apple pie, Marcus's favorite since he was 10 years old. Vanessa answered the door in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile was bright and cold like winter sunshine. "Catherine, so glad you could make it. Come in, come in." The townhouse was stunning. Hardwood floors, vaulted ceilings, modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everything was white and chrome and perfect. Marcus hugged me, and for a moment, he was my boy again. Then Vanessa called him to help in the kitchen, and the moment passed. "We have other guests coming," Vanessa said, taking my pie with 2 fingers like it might contaminate her. "I hope that's okay. Just a few friends." Other guests. She hadn't mentioned other guests. They arrived in pairs. Derek and Amanda, both attorneys. Chen and Sophia, he was a doctor, she worked in finance. Rick and Paulette, venture capitalists. All of them young, successful, dressed in clothes that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. And then there was me, 71 years old in a department store dress and sensible shoes, clearly the odd one out. We gathered in the dining room where Vanessa had set a beautiful table with cloth napkins and crystal glasses. Everyone else got wine. I got water. "Catherine doesn't drink much," Vanessa announced, though she'd never asked me. "She's watching her budget." The first sting. I felt everyone's eyes on me, saw the sympathetic looks, the understanding nods. Poor Catherine counting her pennies. Dinner was served. Roasted chicken for everyone else. And for me, a dog bowl placed directly on my plate, an actual stainless steel dog bowl filled with what looked like wet dog food. The table went silent. I stared at the bowl, my mind blank with shock. Then Vanessa laughed, a high, bright sound like breaking glass. "Oh, come on, Catherine, it's just a joke. You're always complaining about the expensive restaurants we never take you to. I figured I'd save some money. Dog food is cheap, right? And honestly..." She looked around the table, playing to her audience. "It's all you deserve." The silence broke. Derek laughed first, then Amanda, then the others joined in. Nervous laughter at first, then louder, more confident, as if Vanessa's approval made cruelty acceptable. Marcus wasn't laughing. He'd gone pale, looking between his wife and me like he couldn't quite process what was happening. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "that's not..." "Oh, Marcus, don't be so serious. Your mother knows I'm kidding. Right, Catherine? We can take a joke, can't we? Not like we've got anything else going for us." She was smiling. They were all smiling, waiting for me to smile too, to play along, to accept this humiliation as the price of admission to their table. I looked at that dog bowl, at the faces around the table, at my son, who should have stood up for me but sat there silent, torn between his wife and his mother, and I made a decision. I smiled. "You're right, Vanessa," I said pleasantly. "I should learn to take a joke." I picked up my fork and took a bite of the chicken on someone else's plate. "This is delicious. Would anyone like some of my pie for dessert? I made it from scratch." The tension eased slightly. Vanessa looked triumphant. She'd won. She'd put me in my place, and I'd accepted it with a smile. Conversation resumed. They talked about their vacations, their investments, their plans. I listened quietly, eating small bites of whatever people passed me, the dog bowl sitting on my plate like a monument to my humiliation. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it casually. An email from Richard Chen, sent to all board members. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. VH Consulting contract review. Attendance mandatory." I looked at the timestamp. He'd sent it 10 minutes ago. Around the table, the conversation had turned to business. "How about you, Vanessa?" Amanda asked. "How's the consulting business?" Vanessa's face lit up. This was her moment, her chance to shine in front of her friends. "Incredible," she said. "I just secured a contract renewal with Hartwell & Associates. 18-month extension, 20% increase in fees. They absolutely love my work." "Hartwell & Associates," Rick said, impressed. "That's huge. Their CEO is incredibly particular about vendors." "Richard Chen," Vanessa said smugly. "We have a great working relationship. He personally told me they're thrilled with my performance. The contract renewal is basically a formality at this point." "When does it get finalized?" Chen asked. "Board meeting tomorrow morning. Should be signed by noon." My phone buzzed again. This time a text from Richard. Catherine, need your input on VH consulting situation. Several new complaints came in this week. Board may vote to terminate. Your thoughts? I typed back, we'll review everything tonight and share thoughts at meeting. Then I set my phone face down on the table and smiled at Vanessa. That's wonderful news, I said. Board meetings can be so unpredictable, though. You never know what might come up. She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, this is just a formality. Trust me, the board loves me. Richard practically begged me to extend my contract. And the board members? I asked innocently. Do you know any of them? I don't need to know them personally. My work speaks for itself. Besides, board members at that level, they're usually just figureheads. They rubber stamp what the CEO recommends. I took another sip of water, saying nothing. The evening dragged on. More wine was poured, more laughter at my expense. Vanessa told a story about Marcus's clingy mother, who couldn't understand that young couples needed space. Everyone nodded sympathetically. At 10 o'clock, Vanessa's phone rang. She glanced at it and frowned. Sorry, everyone, I need to take this. It's someone from Hartwell. She stepped out of the room. We could hear her voice through the wall, bright and professional. This is Vanessa. Yes, tomorrow morning? But I thought, I see, no, of course. What time? 9 o'clock. Yes, I'll be there. When she came back, her smile was slightly strained. Everything okay? Amanda asked. Fine. They just want me at the board meeting tomorrow. Apparently, they like to have key contractors present when their contracts are being discussed. It's a good sign. Or a bad one, Derek joked. They only bring you in if there's a problem. There's no problem, Vanessa snapped. Then collecting herself, sorry, long week, but no, everything's fine, better than fine. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a second, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar condescension. Catherine, you must be exhausted. These late nights are probably hard at your age. Marcus can drive you home. Actually, I said, standing and smoothing my department store dress. I should get going. I have an early morning tomorrow, important meeting. Really? Vanessa's tone suggested this was unlikely. What kind of meeting? I smiled, that same pleasant, neutral smile I'd been wearing all evening. Board meeting, I said, at Hartwell and Associates. The room went very, very quiet. Vanessa laughed uncertainly. What do you mean? I mean, I have a board meeting at Hartwell tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp. I picked up my purse. Thank you for dinner, Vanessa. It's been illuminating. Her face had gone pale. You're on the board? At Hartwell? For 19 years, I said. Didn't Marcus mention it? I turned to my son, who looked like he'd been hit by a truck. You never told me you were on the board, he whispered. You said you worked in admin. No, honey, you assumed I worked in admin. I said I worked at an investment firm, which I do. I'm on the board at Hartwell, but I also consult for several investment firms. I kept my maiden name professionally, Pierce, not Henderson, so you wouldn't have made the connection. I looked at Vanessa. And I never mentioned it because, frankly, it never seemed relevant to our family dinners. Although, now I wish I had. Vanessa's phone rang again. She stared at it like it was a snake. That's probably Richard, I said. You should answer it. We have a lot to discuss tomorrow. Your contract renewal, those complaints about your conduct with staff members, your overall fit with company culture. Should be a very interesting meeting. Her hand shook as she raised the phone to her ear. Hello? Yes, Mr. Chen, Yes, I understand. 9 o'clock? Yes, sir. She ended the call. Everyone was staring at her. He said the board wants to discuss my performance, she said faintly. He said there have been concerns. Have there? I asked, my voice still pleasant. Well, I'm sure we'll get it all sorted out tomorrow. The board is very thorough. We take vendor relationships seriously, and professional conduct. I looked at the dog bowl still sitting on my plate. Professional conduct is extremely important to us. I walked to the door. Marcus followed me, his face anguished. Mom, I didn't know. About the board, about any of this. If you'd known, what? I asked gently. Would you have stopped her from putting dog food on my plate? Would you have called me on my birthday? Would you have included me in your life? He had no answer. I love you, Marcus, I said. I will always love you. But you let your wife treat me like garbage because you thought I was nobody. Because you thought I had nothing. Because you forgot that I raised you better than this. What are you going to do? He asked. At the meeting? I'm going to do my job, I said. I'm going to evaluate whether VH Consulting is a good fit for Hartwell and Associates. That's all. I left him standing in the doorway and drove home through the quiet streets of Chicago. At 8:30 the next morning, I walked into the Hartwell building wearing my best suit, Armani, tailored, the one I saved for important meetings. My hair was perfect. My heels clicked confidently across the marble lobby. The receptionist knew me by sight. Good morning, Ms. Pierce. They're waiting for you in the boardroom. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. Through the glass walls, I could see Vanessa already there, sitting in one of the chairs along the side of the room, not at the board table. She was dressed impeccably, but her face was drawn and pale. Richard greeted me at the door. Catherine, thank you for coming early. The other board members arrived one by one. 7 of us total. We took our seats at the long table. Vanessa sat against the wall, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Richard called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss the VH Consulting contract. Vanessa Henderson's contract is up for renewal. She's done strong work in many areas, but we've had concerns about her professional conduct with our staff. Catherine, you wanted to ask some questions? I opened my folder. Inside were printouts of every complaint, every incident report, every piece of documentation related to Vanessa's behavior. Ms. Henderson, I said, my voice measured and professional, can you explain the incident from June 14th, where you kept 3 junior staff members waiting for an hour and a half without explanation or apology? Vanessa's eyes were locked on mine. She looked like she was seeing me for the first time. There was a client emergency. I was handling. The records show no client calls or emails during that time, I said. You were having lunch. I may have lost track of time. And the incident where you told Rebecca Tran, one of our administrative assistants, to fetch coffee like a good girl? That was taken out of context. I was joking. Ms. Tran filed a formal complaint, Martha Rodriguez interjected. She didn't find it funny. We went through every complaint, every incident, every example of Vanessa treating Hartwell employees like they were beneath her. And through it all, Vanessa kept looking at me, remembering, I imagine, the dog bowl, the laughter. It's all you deserve. Miss Henderson, I said finally, you do excellent technical work. Your strategies are sound, your execution is professional, your clients are satisfied. But this company values respect. We value how people treat each other, regardless of position or status. And the pattern we're seeing suggests you view some people as more worthy of respect than others. That's not true, she said, but her voice was weak. Then help me understand, I said quietly. Help me understand why you'd call someone clingy and desperate when they haven't asked you for anything. Why you'd spread lies about someone being poor when they gave you $15,000 for your wedding. Why you'd serve someone dog food at a dinner party and tell them it's all they deserve. The room went completely silent. The other board members were staring at me. You're talking about yourself, David Kim said slowly. She did that to you? Last night, I confirmed, at a dinner party at her home, in front of guests, with my son watching. Richard Chen's face had gone red. Are you telling me that you sat through that kind of treatment, knowing you had this meeting this morning, and you still came here prepared to evaluate her contract fairly? I came here to do my job, I said. My personal feelings about Ms. Henderson are irrelevant to whether she's serving this company well, but her pattern of treating people she perceives as beneath her with contempt, that's extremely relevant. I looked at Vanessa. She was crying silently, mascara running down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. I thought you were... Nobody, I finished. You thought I was nobody. And that's exactly the problem, Ms. Henderson. You treated me terribly not because of anything I did, but because of who you thought I was. And you've done the same thing to our staff here. You've treated people with cruelty and condescension because you decided they didn't matter. I'll change, she said desperately. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll make it right. Perhaps you will, I said, but not here, not at Hartwell. I looked around the table. 6 faces looked back at me, and I saw agreement in everyone. I moved to terminate the VH Consulting contract effective immediately, I said. Do I have a second? Seconded, Martha Rodriguez said quietly. All in favor? 7 hands went up. The motion passes, I said. Ms. Henderson, your contract with Hartwell and Associates is terminated. You'll receive payment for work completed through today, and we'll provide references for your technical skills. But your relationship with this company is over. Vanessa stood up, swaying slightly. She looked at me with something like hatred in her eyes. You planned this, she said. You wanted revenge. No, I said. I wanted you to understand that actions have consequences, that how you treat people matters, that kindness and respect aren't luxuries you extend only to people you deem worthy. They're basic human decency you owe to everyone. She grabbed her things and fled the boardroom. We could hear her sobbing in the hallway. I drove to Lincoln Park and sat on a bench overlooking the pond, watching ducks glide across the water. My phone rang. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Mom, His voice cracked. I don't even know what to say. Vanessa told me what happened at the board meeting. She's devastated. But Mom, what she did to you last night, I can't stop thinking about it. I just sat there. I let her humiliate you, and I didn't stop it. What kind of son does that make me? I know I don't deserve it, but could you call me? Please? I need my mom. I sat there for a long time, phone in my hand, watching the ducks. Then I called him back. Mom? He answered on the first ring. I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry for everything, for forgetting your birthday, for the distance, for letting Vanessa treat you like that, for not standing up for you when it mattered. We talked for an hour. He told me about the fights he'd had with Vanessa after I left the dinner party, how she'd insisted it was just a joke, that I was overreacting, how he'd finally seen her the way I'd seen her all along, someone who measured people's worth by their bank accounts and social status. She's talking about divorce, he said. She says I chose you over her. Did you? I chose right over wrong, he said. I chose decency over cruelty. If that means I chose you over her, then yes, I did. Marcus filed for divorce 3 weeks later. Vanessa fought it, but Marcus held firm. Marcus and I have dinner every Sunday now, just the 2 of us, at my apartment. I make pot roast. He brings dessert. We talk about his job, my upcoming retirement, the books we're reading, the movies we want to see. Last Sunday, as he was leaving, he hugged me tight and said, I'm proud of you, Mom, for building the life you built, for being who you are, for teaching me what real strength looks like. What does real strength look like? I asked. It looks like making pot roast for your son every Sunday, he said, even after he forgot your birthday, even after he let you down. I smiled. That's not strength, baby. That's just love. Maybe they're the same thing, he said. I sit here now in my modest apartment with my floral couch and my department store dresses, and I think about that night, the dog bowl on my plate, the laughter, the humiliation, and I think about the choice I made. Not revenge exactly, though I won't pretend there wasn't satisfaction in watching Vanessa realize who I really was. But more than that, accountability. The choice to stand up and say, this is not okay. You don't get to treat people this way. Actions have consequences.